Everybody is here. Welcome to Park, everybody. This is, I think, our 9th season here at Park, and we really appreciate the hospitality the Park people have given us. We love their dining room and the catering that goes along with it, and, of course, this theater-style auditorium, which is just terrific for this kind of an event. So anyway, I want to say just a word about Park. So this is the advertisement, but it's a really interesting place. Many of you probably know this is where Ethernet was invented, and a lot of the kind of Apple-based sort of things like Windows and so on that were icons that were created here and then used. So it's quite a historic place from that standpoint. These days, what it does is that it researches in technologies and certain vertical segments, typically on behalf of large companies. Sometimes it incubates startup companies as well. So that's what Park does, and we really appreciate their being here. Okay, so what you came to hear is there a microgrid in your future? And the answer is probably yes, and it's going to happen in all kinds of interesting ways, which you're going to hear about soon. I want to introduce now our host and moderator, Barry Cinnamon, who is also the event manager. He put this together. He recruited the panel and everything, and I call him Mr. Green because he's been in the solar industry for how long?
Since 1977.
1977. That's perseverance.
On top of the nuclear engineering building at MIT.
Interesting history. Anyway, here's Barry Cinnamon.
Let's get to the right slides here. Hey, all right, it's working. All right, Doug, thank you very much for that introduction. Very, very, very kind. I want to get just a sense of the audience of how many people are familiar with solar and storage. So if you have solar on your home or your business, raise your hand. Well, I should have said, who doesn't have solar on their home or business? It's like 10 people. Okay, among the people, well, regardless of whether you have solar or not, who's planning on adding a battery to your solar system or just to your house?
I have one.
You've got one, all right. Just very few people probably have them now, and Peter will explain why in a minute. So I want to get started with some introductory slides just to set the background for this absolutely terrific panel that we have here. The global warming problems that we're having just keep getting worse and worse. You're probably familiar with the depressing UN report that came out last week about how hard it's going to be to keep global warming less than 1.5 degrees C. It's just really, really challenging. This report talks about an investment that's required of $900 billion per year by the world economy for 25 years to keep it under 1.5 degrees. So we have to act very fast, and hopefully we have the political will to do that. Now, in addition to that money, what's really going to accelerate that are economics. Economics are going to drive these practical solutions. And foremost among that are cheaper solar, cheaper batteries, and also, ironically, higher electric rates, because that's going to improve the economics for customers. Now, the interesting thing is conventional utilities cannot generate and deliver power as cheaply as behind-the-meter sources. Behind-the-meter is the way we characterize it. If your power is behind the meter, it's owned by the customer. If it's in front of the meter, it's owned by the utility. And it's just interesting how those economics have changed. On-site generation and on-site storage is going to be a lot cheaper than any system that's put in by the utility. And the electric rates that we're paying are dramatically different, whether it's utility electricity or your own electricity. For example, California average electric rates are now 22 cents a kilowatt hour. If you have rooftop solar, you put in a system now, you're looking at electricity rates of about 7 cents a kilowatt hour amortized over the lifespan of the system. So it's a third the price. And it's just going to, that discrepancy is just going to increase. Solar is going to get cheaper and cheaper, and utilities, no doubt in my mind, are going to continue to see their electricity costs go up. Now, Battery storage is growing really fast, but it's tiny, it's microscopic. These are some slides from Green Tech Media. We're still at the blade part of the hockey stick. You see that little red curve over there. Now, of course, we're in Sharks territory, so my apologies to you diehard Boston Bruins fans. Now, when you look at these charts, the utility scale and some commercial storage has been out there for about 5 years. But the first practical residential battery storage systems just started shipping about a year or two ago. LGChem was nice enough to provide us with this 10 kilowatt hour battery. If anybody wants to see what it's like, come over and kick the tires a little bit. But this is the kind of battery that's going in, and they work, and that's just a terrific benefit. Now, what many people are going to think, you look at this hockey stick and what's going to continue to happen, it should continue to go up. How many people, based on this curve, think that we're going to install more residential batteries in Q4 than we did in Q2? How many people think it's going to go up? Okay. Believe it or not, the sales of batteries like this and Teslas, they're actually going to decline at the end of the year. The hockey stick is broken. And the reason is we don't have enough batteries. The demand just kind of went through the roof, and LG Chem and Tesla, pretty much the only ones out there, they really just were surprised by the incredible demand. And Peter's going to talk about that a little bit more later. We kind of know where he's based, so we know where we can get the batteries if it's an emergency. Oh, and by the way, this one's a dummy, so it's not going to work. Okay, but nobody just buys batteries. You're buying a complete system. Just like nobody buys just the solar panels. You need for a battery storage system or energy storage system, we need the solar panels, we need an inverter, we need a backup sub-panel for critical loads, because these systems right now can't power the whole house. They can't power a central AC, but they can power your critical loads pretty much indefinitely as long as the sun's going to shine the next day. But what's interesting about this kind of battery technology, unlike conventional lead-acid technology, which is what I used to put in 15 years ago, is this is an integrated battery subsystem. It includes a battery management system with a charge controller, temperature controls. It's almost a bulletproof outdoor-rated enclosure. It has circuit breakers and software. So you can just kind of hang it on the wall, and it's just going to work for 10 years. And I believe the Tesla system's similar. Now, in addition to the battery, you've got the inverter, and the inverter, as you can see in this picture, it's kind of the heart. It's a centralized part of the whole system. It connects to the solar, it connects to the grid, it connects to the battery, and there's software that runs on the inverter, multiple layers of software that allow installers to operate it, customers to see the performance, and the manufacturers and even the utilities to manage it. And also, the inverter provides a communications gateway. Communications is really a tricky challenge, but we'll talk about that more later. Now, cool thing is, and we all know, this is just a nice trend. We saw the graph at the beginning. Battery costs are coming down fast. But here's the irony. Even if batteries were free, completely free, these battery storage systems would still be relatively expensive. You can just see if you subtract out the $2,000 cost of the cells from the $12,000 cost of the system. I was kind of wondering, how does this apply to electric vehicles? Kind of similar, right? So I took a look to see what the SRP of a Chevy Bolt is. $36,000. Bernadette, you drove one here, right? Good. And so then I wanted to see what the battery subsystem for that car cost. And GM has it on their website for $16,000. So the subsystem's about half the cost of the complete system. And interestingly, for the 2018 battery system that you might add to your house with this battery, the battery subsystem itself is about $5,500. So where's the rest of the costs if the cells are so cheap? Well, there's a lot of other cost factors involved. We call them soft costs in the industry. It's things like installation, permitting, inspections, interconnection with the utility, overhead. It's just like building a house, right? 2x4s are really cheap, but it still costs $350 a square foot to build a house around here. So there's just a lot of work and labor involved. So in addition to reducing these soft costs, there's another big opportunity. That's the infamous duck curve. At least it's infamous in our solar industry. We all know what it is. You might have heard about it or read about it. So this duck curve on the left is basically a representation of California's electric demand. of how the demand changes throughout the day. And when I started in solar out here about in 2001, the peak demand was around 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Electric rates were highest on the time of use plan in PG&E territory from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. But what happened is a lot of people started putting in solar. So it kind of mellowed out that curve. There was no longer a blue spike in the middle of the day. And then what happened is the utilities added a lot of solar and wind, and you can see that curve at the bottom, that gray curve, which is a nice bell-shaped curve, shows what happens to the solar generation during the day. And when you overlay those two, you get this orange, dip. Looks like a little bit of a valley. Somebody must have thought it looked like a duck. Maybe they had too many brownies that afternoon. And now we're kind of stuck with that duck curve image forever. So the challenge for utilities, and if we look at the right, in the morning, as solar starts coming on, the utilities have to gradually shut down their generation. Otherwise, there's going to be too much generation because we've got solar from the utility, we've got behind-the-meter solar. They've got to start shutting down those natural gas plants. The big problem is they have to ramp up very quickly in the late afternoon. That's the neck of the duck. That's where the big problem is. And battery storage is the absolute perfect way to soak up that extra solar energy during the day. So you can store it and then use that energy in the evening at the head of the duck, and there's good economic reasons to do this. So you'd think that the reason why customers would be installing batteries right now is to react to the fact that there's this duck curve and they want to save some money by doing that. Well, you'd think that the customers would want to cook the duck's goose, so to speak. I probably completely mangled that metaphor. And it's surprisingly wrong. They don't care. That was a big surprise to many people in the industry. Let's look and see why businesses and homes are installing battery storage. If you look at the top part of these lines, the jagged mountainous parts, this represents the power demand for a typical customer. Whether it's residential or commercial, they're all kind of similar. Now, commercial and industrial customers want to remove those peaks. They get hit with these things called demand charges. For example, for a commercial building like this building, although maybe EPRI gets a special rate, who knows. For this building, at 9 o'clock in the morning, equipment turns on, people plug in their electric vehicles. There's a spike in the morning, and they charge extra, a really high amount for that peak demand. So if your business has big banks of batteries, you can deplete the battery at that point, and you can eliminate those really high demand charges. Many companies have higher demand charges than their kilowatt-hour electric rate charges. So that's a really good reason to put in batteries from a commercial customer standpoint. Now, one would think that residential customers would want to install their batteries to time shift their energy. We call it rate arbitraging. The daytime rates, if you're on the EV electric rate in PG&E territory, is 25 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you have solar, you can run your meter backwards at 25 cents a kilowatt hour. That's nice. But the afternoon and evening rates are 45 cents a kilowatt hour. It makes a lot more economic sense if you could store your daytime energy in your battery, and then you use that daytime energy in the afternoon and evening when it would be 45 cents a kilowatt hour. It's a kind of good economics. The big surprise to the industry, almost every inverter company just kind of missed this. I got hats off to SolarEdge because they didn't. The residential customers don't care about this arbitrage thing yet. It surprised everybody, especially some inverter companies and battery companies. Now, the surprise is homeowners and some businesses, they're putting in batteries for when the grid goes down. That shouldn't happen. We're like first world here, but sometimes maybe not. We've all experienced occasional blackouts, but it's getting more and more common. You might have read the paper that last weekend PG&E cut the power off to 60,000 people up in Napa, Sonoma, and Lake counties because of high wind events. They had 50-mile-an-hour wind, 55-mile-an-hour winds. So PG&E said, well, we don't want any chance of any more fires. Maybe their insurance company reminded them of their liability. And they shut the power off to 60,000 people. You're just, there's no fires, there's no earthquake. It's a nice breezy day, no power. And that kind of thing is going to happen more and more. So not only are these grid failures more and more common, but we're also much more dependent on electricity. When the power goes out in our 21st century paradise, we can't cook, We have no hot water. We can't heat or cool our house. We can't drive anywhere to get food because our EV might be out of batteries. We can't even call our friends to complain. It's like Gilligan's Island in 2018. And that's the reason why most residential customers are putting in batteries. It's for that resiliency. Okay. I've talked way too much already. You came to hear from our fantastic panel of experts. These are, like, I would consider these the world experts on these issues. So I'm going to get started here. Our first panelist is, let me get the slide going here, Bernadette Del Piero. Bernadette's the executive director of the California Solar and Storage Association. For 40 years, it was called the California Solar Energy Industries Association, but Bernadette was farsighted enough to say, hey, we better rebrand because this industry is going beyond solar. And as a result of her hard work, she just came off a successful 3-year campaign for battery rebates in California, and plus last week was a whirlwind of planning, annual board meetings, and an annual meeting. So Bernadette's a good friend, and I would absolutely, without a doubt, say that she's the smartest and most effective policy advocate for solar and batteries in the entire country. Maybe in the entire world, but I don't deal beyond the U.S. right now. So welcome here, Bernadette.
Thank you, Barry. That, is a compliment, except there's not that many of us, so to say. So again, thank you so much, Barry. Barry is like, Chrissy's in the back there, she knows, Barry goes everywhere with a Swiss Army knife, and that's basically a metaphor. He is the jack of all trades. He is everything. He is everywhere. He's the former board president of CalCia, has been in the industry forever, and is always behind the smartest, best, and in this case, best, well put together panel. So it is a pleasure to be here. I came up from Sacramento to come meet with you guys tonight. I'm a little bit intimidated by MIT grads. I'm just a lowly Cal grad. But I do have a PhD basically in communication and in promoting clean energy technologies. I've been doing policy work in Sacramento since 2002. I'm focused on distributed energy resources. And so it's been a really pleasure to come on board with the California Solar and Storage Association. Real quick, a background on us. We are the state's oldest and largest clean energy business association. We have over 500 business members statewide and represent the whole sector of the industry of solar and storage, contractors and manufacturers and service providers. So it's great to be here. I want to start with 4 of my favorite facts related to solar. One is that we are today, it doesn't surprise me that so many people raise their hands in the room here. You'd be surprised how many people in the state legislature would raise their hands too. It's helping us out a lot as we work to pass legislation. But we install 11 solar systems an hour in California, all year long, 11 an hour. And what my favorite fact related to that is twice as many people go solar in Bakersfield than in San Francisco. Isn't that a great fact? And one of my other favorite experiences since joining the CalCia team in 2013 is the fact that it was Republican farmers that basically led to the passage of the federal investment tax credit. They are the ones that pulled together all the district meetings with all of those Republican members of Congress and got that through with a Republican-controlled Congress. So this is the politics of yes, I like to say in Sacramento, and that's exciting because that's how we're going to get these solutions out on the ground and on the road and in our homes. Barry mentioned all of those soft costs to deployment of clean energy resources, and those are a real challenge, a real barrier. However, one of the flip sides of that cost, putting aside bureaucracy and Byzantine processes that we would like to streamline, but is that solar and storage, especially at the distributed level, is a job creator. We employ over 86,000 people statewide. Those are in Bakersfield as well as San Francisco, and that is more than all of the investor-owned utilities and municipal utilities combined. So we are turning those solar arrays and those battery cells into real jobs for real people and economic opportunity. What I wanted to just focus on is what I think is really interesting as somebody who's been pushing transformational policies in California and hoping to lead the charge for the rest of the country, is how similar where we are today is to where we were with photovoltaics in circa 2007, 2008. And so Barry mentioned actually the shortage of battery cells that we're experiencing right now. That's exactly what happened to the market basically around 2008 when the solar industry started to take off in California and other countries around the world, and manufacturing hadn't yet caught up. Once they did, it only took a little bit, then prices just dropped, and we saw massive deployment. So real quickly, I just have 4 slides to kind of illustrate where we're at. So this is, again, piggybacking on some of Barry's slides, this is California storage projects. These are behind-the-meter storage projects, both commercial and residential, from the past 12 months. And these are by reservations, so those of you who really like to dig into data, some of these will drop out. Some of these reservations won't become real, but it's still a pretty good measure and proxy of how we're doing. The orange bars are megawatts installed, and the blue line is the number of systems. And so, as you can see, we've installed, we're basically at the point of, in July, again, over that 12-month period of installing about 160 megawatts of, again, behind-the-meter residential and commercial storage systems, totaling about 5,000 installs. Okay, so keep those numbers in your mind. I'm going to show you the exact same time period for photovoltaic solar systems, rooftop solar. So as you can see here, the exact same time period, we installed a gigawatt, again, compared to 120 megawatts, and 120,000 systems over that same period of time. This is basically where we are here, is essentially if you were to map out that growth of photovoltaics that we've seen in California since 2002, we'd be basically around where we were circa 2007. So we're just as, again, Barry's hockey stick, we're just at the brink of tremendous growth. But public policy absolutely drives these markets. They don't happen on their own. Consumer demand is essential. I always say there's 3 things we need to build markets, transformational markets. We need consumer demand, we need experienced businesses, and we need public policy and politicians that embrace the change. And it's those 3 things together that make California so important to our clean energy marketplace. So SB 700, massive kudos to State Senator Scott Wiener from San Francisco. He stuck with us and fought really hard to get this bill to the finish line in face of opposition from the utility companies to do something pretty simple. Provide incentives, upfront incentives for consumers to add a battery to their home, their farm, their school, their business. We were able to get it through. It's focused on customer-sided energy storage. It extends an existing program out to 2025. It authorizes up to $800 million in these consumer incentives, and it makes sure to preserve a good portion of the funds for disadvantaged communities. And so this is just a visual of what we hope to see happen. This is the almost identical chart to what we did see happen with photovoltaics. Again, we passed in 2006 the Million Solar Roofs Initiative. That did the same concept as what we're doing with storage. We created a long-term program, provided that upfront incentive, drove consumer demand, and lowered prices. So what you see here is our vision of what hopefully will happen with storage, if not sooner than what we're predicting here. So again, the blue bars are the megawatt, or the numbers of systems in this case, building up cumulatively over time. As you can see, 2008, we're just getting out of the gates with our roughly 4,000 to 5,000 systems that we expect to install this year. And that blue line coming down is the price per kilowatt hour. So as we decline, as the price declines, the rebate will basically also decline, and what the consumer savings, the value is, will basically stay the same over the course of that period. So we'll bring the prices down by increasing demand. We'll bring that rebate down to make those $800 million go further, and we'll create all of those jobs and economic opportunity as well as clean energy all along the way. Last but not least, I like to kind of continually remind our policymakers that these types of investments, upfront investments, while it may seem expensive when they're casting these votes, are really smart investments in the long haul. So right now, if we just do energy the old way, where we as ratepayers all put all of our money in building centralized power plants and then having to build all the transmission lines and upkeep all of that system, we are actually spending way more money than we need to, compared to if we were to build up our distribution system and distribute energy resources using more of our energy on site, negating a lot of the need for expensive infrastructure investments. And in fact, in March of this year, CAISO, California Independent System Operator, announced that that there were $2.6 billion of grid investments that could be foregone because of distributed energy resources. $2.6 billion saved by all of us ratepayers, whether we had solar and storage or not. Those were real savings. This is what we've been promising for many years, and it's finally coming to fruition. Just to give you a context to that $2.6 billion, that Million Solar Roofs initiative I spoke to that we passed back in 2006, that was the $3 billion program. So it is more than going to be paying for itself for ratepayers to make that investment, not to mention all of the clean energy and community development and economic development opportunities that it created. So with that, I'll pass it over to our next speakers, and I look forward to the conversation and the questions. Thank you, Barry.
All right. Oh, great. Thank you, Bernadette. Next is Peter Gibson. Peter's the head of energy storage solutions business in North America for LGChem. I never heard of LGChem, but they're just a monster in batteries, one of the world's biggest battery manufacturers. Their product, this and their commercial and utility scale versions, their products are so good that they can't make them fast enough. Right now, Peter's main job is mostly to tell customers to give him accurate forecasts for next year, because there's just no batteries right now. They'll be here, and basically just telling customers, and wait till January for the next shipment and make sure you get your orders in early. So, right. Okay, so come on up, Peter.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Barry. Thanks for inviting me to participate, and thanks for inviting LG Chem to join this evening's event, and appreciate everyone spending the evening with us. I feel like I'm the bad guy already without even saying a few words, being the cause for these market slowdowns and probably lots of other ill-fitting bad things too. So what I wanted to do in the space of about 5 minutes is just to give a very quick summary as to a little bit about LG, and I don't want this to be a sales job, so apologies if it comes across that way. That's not the intent. It's really just to give a flavor to the audience as to what is happening within one of the world's largest battery companies. There's others which are going through a similar thing. Say a little bit about the way in which we serve the market by means of the products we put in there, but it's really leading up to what our vision is going forward. And I think it's important just to make sure you understand where we are as a company and where our products are before we get on to the vision. So LG Chem is part of the LG Group. And you may be more familiar with LG in terms of TVs. I since joining LG, I now realize that almost every Hilton or Hilton chain hotel has an LG TV in the room, and it can never escape from work when you're even on vacation, and the cell phones as well. But LG is a very large, about $130 billion global business, but it's got a number of business units as shown on this slide that are into chemicals, electronics, and telecoms and services. So electronics, that's the TV, it's the white goods, it's the telephone services on the right. But LG Chem, we are the chemical company part of the LG Group, and we're actually a separately traded company. It's a bit different how Asian companies are constructed. But we have our own shareholdings, and we are a separate company traded on the Seoul Bourse. And that gives us a lot of flexibility. It's nice to have the big parent behind us with all of the financial security that brings, but we have a lot of ability to run the business a little bit independently. Now, so LG Chem, and I'm just diving straight into our business now. we are about a $24 billion business. The number varies a little bit depending upon what exchange rate we use here. But our core competency is in chemical materials, and we've been in this business, on the chemical engineering business, for more than 50 years. And we used that knowledge of materials to move into the battery business back in the 1990s. Hard to believe it was that long ago. About 25 years ago is when LGChem first got involved in lithium batteries, and that was for consumer applications, shown on the left side of the slide. The usual things, laptops and cell phones. But that gave us a good understanding of different lithium chemistries and what worked well. And that was used as a lever to get into the automotive business in the early 2000s. And the automotive business, shown on the top right, that's a much harder business to get into, especially from an Asian company and trying to get into the North American or the European car companies. And we started off with some contracts with the Asian companies, the Asian car manufacturers, but the big breakthrough was with the selection of our batteries by General Motors for the Chevy Volt with a V, the hybrid, the plug-in hybrid. And that was in the early 2000s, and that really enabled our battery business, automotive business, to take off. And we used the automotive battery expertise to get into the stationary storage. So stationary storage was the third link in the chain. And we got involved in that probably about 2008, 2009, so almost in that for just less than 10 years. But the key thing here is, and the key message on this slide, is the automotive and the stationary energy storage businesses have a very strong bond. They basically use not just the same chemistry, but the same type of cell. And you'll see why that's advantageous, not just to LG Chem, but to our customers when we talk a little bit about the vision. Just to put it into perspective as well, I completely agree with how Barry started off, saying that it was the tip of the blade on the hockey stick. We sometimes have to remind ourselves in LG Chem, the term I use, we're still at the embryonic stage of the business. Despite the fact so much has been done in the past 5 years, it's still a very early stage business. Having said that, on the automotive side, we've got almost 1 million vehicles around the world on the road with LG Chem batteries, and that's everything from a small hybrid to a full battery electric vehicle. And on stationary storage, about 5,000 megawatt hours of capacity that's either deployed or on firm order. So there's an awful lot of experience building very quickly on the road and stationary. And to support that, even though we are critically short of production capacity, as has been mentioned about 3 million times already, we manufacture in 3 continents. We manufacture in Asia, in Korea and China. We manufacture in Europe, in Western Poland. And surprise, surprise, we actually manufacture in the US. And I'm not going to take anything away from our friends in Fremont. They've done a great job in promoting the storage business. But they were many years behind having the gigafactory operational. We had a factory in Holland, Michigan, manufacturing a gigawatt hours of capacity in 2013, albeit for the automotive business for GM. So let me talk a little bit about our products. And I only want to do that with one slide. And I'll just give a couple of details for each product segment. On the left, we've got the residential business, and I think I owe Barry some credit for bringing this along to the event. It's always good to see some hardware. It's very rare we get the chance to see some hardware. On the residential business, one of my colleagues, Lynn Tran, in the audience here, she manages our North American residential business. And we only delivered our first battery in April last year. And this year, we'll be installing more than 10,000 units. And next year, that residential business will be about a $125 million business just for the batteries alone. And it's extraordinary. It's really genuinely taken us by surprise how quickly that market has taken off. Today, we've got batteries in 44 U.S. states. California is unquestionably the largest market with about 60%. But we simply have not been able to make enough of them. It's really taken us by surprise. Next year, even though we're expecting to increase our production by about 3.5x, I still think we're going to be struggling for capacity. For the next segment on the top right is the behind-the-meter commercial industrial segment. I'm showing a picture of just one typical system that was put together by Lockheed Martin using our batteries, but we work with about 5 other system integrators. And that business has been going extraordinarily fast in the past couple of years. And the main reason for that is 5 years ago when I first came into the business, most of these behind-the-meter systems were custom built. But now we've got experienced integrators like Lockheed Martin, Johnson Controls, Caterpillar, who are putting together standard building blocks. And by having a standard building block that's factory assembled, tested, and drop shipped, there's the potential to reduce the cost, the installed cost, that's the equipment and the installation costs. Very optimistic, personally, about the growth in that segment going forward. And then last but not least, on the bottom right is the in front of the meter grid scale systems. That's the sort of segment that most of the media tends to pick up on, but as we'll see later, that may not be where the real market opportunities lie. So, moving forward, the vision, I think it's really exciting to see how fast the market has developed, but also what lies ahead. And everyone's got their own crystal ball and sees it slightly differently. But the subject of today's talk is microgrids. I looked upon that as really mean distributed systems, distributed storage. And unquestionably, the cost-effective storage is a key element to the success in distributed systems, whether they're full microgrids or whether it's just rooftop solar and storage. And much has been achieved in the past 5 years to reduce costs. When I first joined LGChem, the battery costs were about $800 a kilowatt hour, and now for grid scale systems, they're about 25% of that. So a lot has been done in 5 years. A lot is often made of the mass production as being a way to reduce costs, and to an extent, it's partly true. And this slide shows just the picture from LGChem, and if I can just very quickly move to one side. In 2018, if you take our stationary storage, our consumer batteries, and our automotive production capacity, it's about 60 gigawatt hours annually. And in 2020, it'll be somewhere close to about 130 gigawatt hours, so more than doubling. And even then, I think we're going to be struggling to keep up with demand. But mass production helps to bring costs down, but it's not the only ingredient. Coming back to what we said before, the business is at the early stage of the hockey stick. There's a lot can be done with the cell chemistry, improving the module design, improving the system design, integration with the inverters. And so I think it's a bit misleading to think that mass production is the only path towards bringing battery costs down. There's lots of other factors that will help drive that. And just to illustrate how I think this plays into the hands of the handful of very large global companies that are in the battery business. LG Chem, for the past 5 years, we've spent $250 million on research and development on batteries. And the good thing is we can spread that R&D across two large segments, automotive and ESS. Stationary storage, that is, and that's aimed at trying to improve energy density, obviously reduce costs, of course, but if we can reduce the degradation and extend the life, they will all help to reduce the cost of the installed system. So there's a lot more that can be done apart from just the manufacturing costs. And then the final thing in terms of the vision that I would suggest is coming back again to microgrids. The media does get a lot of attention on the large grid scale systems. The announcements by PG&E SC for large front-of-the-meter systems gets a lot of attention. But I personally think that the biggest market for LG Chem in, say, 10 years' time is going to be for distributed systems. And distributed can be residential, it could be behind-the-meter C&I, it could be smaller scale systems owned by the utility at the substations. But that's where the majority of battery systems will be installed, not the large front-of-the-meter systems. And so the answer to Barry's question is, yes, microgrids do have a future. Thanks.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Peter. That was great. I'm glad to see that you're here. That we do have a future. It's good. It's good. Let's get to the next. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Lior Handlesman. Lior's the founder of SolarEdge, the most profitable inverter company in the world. We use their inverters. They're great. They work. He started about a dozen years ago with optimizers that were improving the efficiency of an individual solar panel. Optimizers and software. Software was kind of handy. Then they did a very smart thing. They came out with their own inverter. and software with the inverter. Now they're shipping their storage inverters that work with the LGChem battery and in future others with software. Next, I don't know what it is they're going to be doing, but it's probably going to include software. Lior has the longest commute home. Bernadette's second longest to Sacramento, but Lior's got to go back to Israel. But he's always thinking 5 moves ahead. So personally, I would never play chess with this guy. Kick my butt.
Thanks, Barry. Barry mentioned that I founded SolarEdge, so one of the first people, I didn't know anything about solar when we came up with the idea of optimization in solar systems. We Googled for experts. I think Barry was one of the first names we found. We flew in. I flew in hoping that Barry can help me. He refused. But we ended up still working together and being friends. So thank you, Barry. So actually, I want to start by telling you how did we migrate into storage inverters. We as Barry said, we were selling inverters to 2015. We took SolarEdge public, getting a very nice market share in solar inverters, and in many of the homes that our inverters were installed, there was some kind of a backup solution, maybe a small UPS for a computer or maybe a generator, and there were devices, smart devices. IoT was waking up, smart thermostats and other smart devices that control loads around the home. And there were EV chargers, and we even saw some systems where there was separate, what was called AC coupled storage systems. And the regulation around the world started to change. Same like in California, from net metering, it moved to time of use net metering. In Hawaii, solar systems were, for a long period, not allowed to be installed because there was too much solar on the grid, kind of like a duck curve in the Hawaiian market. And all around the world, Australia, Germany, feed-in tariff and net metering were kicked out and replaced with regimes where basically the utility said, we don't want solar energy on our grid. If you have solar energy, use it or lose it. And that actually, we saw that as the next evolution in the PV industry. It is the next evolution or it was actually the next evolution in the PV market. And we decided that our next generation of inverters are actually going to be one inverter to rule them all. That is our storage inverter. Some other companies also have this. You don't have to buy it from SolarEdge, but we realized that if you really want to use your solar energy or else you lose it, you need one inverter that can control a battery and route solar energy to the battery if you don't have anything to do with it. So if it's now midday, everybody's out for work, and your PV system is generating energy, then why won't we throw that energy into a battery? But even if you don't have a battery, let's turn on the hot water heater. If it's an electrical hot water heater, let's charge the car. Let's route the energy to energy loads around the home. So one inverter to rule them all, an inverter that can provide backup for the home, an inverter in case of an outage, an inverter that can control the battery, an inverter that for sure controls the PV generation, and even control loads around the home and your EV charger, so that in a market like Hawaii, which is what we call a maximized self-consumption market, you really can get to a point where you're utilizing your solar energy even at night from your battery and utilizing your loads in a much smarter way. Because if you have a pool pump and you want to filter your water for 30 hours a week, let the inverter decide when to do it. And when will the inverter do it? When there's either low rates or when there's available energy stored or being generated. So that was a very nice phase, and actually that is a lot of what we sell now in many of the geographies. In Germany today, 1 out of 2 systems that is installed is already installed with batteries. In Australia, it's 1 out of 4. Here in the US, it's not that much, even not in California, but we are at a clear rate to go there. In Hawaii, I would assume that many of the systems are already with storage. And that actually opens a new opportunity, and that's what in our belief is the next step for the solar grid. We are all turning from consumers to what we call prosumers. You are all, everyone that raised their hand, you're producing energy and you're consuming energy. And if you are a producer and a consumer, then you are actually a prosumer. And that is bringing about an evolution in the way our grid is built. So the grid is slowly, because grids don't change that fast. We don't want them to change that fast. We like our reliable power, but grids are migrating from a centralized network where there is central generation, and long transmission lines, which are, by the way, very, very expensive and hard to maintain and need to be continuously beefed up because we all consume more and more energy. The grid is migrating to a new model of distributed network where everyone can consume and everyone can produce. And if you produce, you don't have to just stay in this type of maximized self-consumption. If I have energy in my home and you don't have energy in your home, why won't I produce energy and you can consume it? It would save the network a lot of hassle. Don't have to route the energy to a lot of losses and a lot of cables, and you don't have to beef up continuously the network to our neighborhood because I have enough capacity to feed your home, or we have enough capacity to feed everyone's home. And that's the next step of the grid. It brings some concerns from cyber attacks. It also brings resiliency from cyber attacks. And it brings a need for, Barry? Software. Exactly. VPP. So I want to show you a concept which is actually already running, a concept which is called in the industry virtual power plant. What is a virtual power plant? It's an aggregation of systems. So a virtual power plant is when you have a lot of systems. These systems have batteries. These systems have solar generation. These systems have manageable loads like EV chargers or hot water heaters or whatever big loads that you may think of. And the utility to a software interface, to a cloud software interface, can actually see these systems as if it's one big power plant. Now, what you see here is a cloud service. It's an aggregator service. SolarEdge provides this, but also other companies, as I said earlier, but not as many. And we actually have running deployed virtual power plants around the world, where basically, if you're a network operator and you have a shortage of energy in a specific area, and let's say that you need, let's take the simplest case possible, you need 10 megawatts of power for the coming 2 hours because of that ramp in the duck's neck, and we want to cut the duck's head. So rather than generating more power in the power station, and maybe over time as loads go up, you need to beef up the substation, you need to beef up the power lines. Why won't you control all the systems in that area, make them generate the needed 10 megawatt hours for 2 hours, the 10 megawatt peak power for 2 hours, in order to fulfill the need in that area. Now, for a utility to do that when you have 10,000 systems or even 1,000 systems, that's very complicated because every system is different. Your system is down because you're out and you have an outage, and your battery is half depleted, and you are now charging your car, and your system is producing a lot of energy because you have a solar panel. It's too much data for a utility operator to manage and decide what to do. So the aggregator service, what it does, it gets a command. From this time to this time, you need to dispatch 10 megawatt of power. The aggregator will then disaggregate that command into thousands, tens of thousands of separate commands to separate systems. If one system has a low state of charge, it will dispatch it at low power, so it would last for the full duration of the event. If another system has a lot of power, it will dispatch it at a higher power. And if you're charging your car and you allowed us to control your EV charger, then we can take your EV charger off the grid for 2 hours. That is like pushing power to the grid. It is exactly symmetrical. It's the same. So it will disaggregate that command to thousands of systems in order to fulfill the load. So that's one example. Another example is an energy retailer. What do energy retailers do, energy suppliers? They buy electricity at the wholesale market at varying prices, and they sell them to us at retail price, which is a fixed price. And now you have a price surge in the wholesale market. Me, as an energy retailer, I start losing money because I have to buy power expensive because there's a price surge on the wholesale market, and I cannot up your prices because we have a deal. If I, as an energy retailer, have a VPP deployed, I can deploy that VPP and hedge against this price surge. And of course, you as homeowners, you need to benefit from that. So usually the economy of VPP means that for you giving access to your resource, you are getting paid and compensated. One very typical form of compensation is that you get part of your system at a big discount. If a battery is, I don't know, X $1,000, then you get it at $200, $500 less, and for that you give access for 10 hours a year, which is nothing in money. It's a great deal for you. So everybody makes money. The system owner, the energy retailer, the network operator. And this type of system, it's not a dream. I want to show to you how it actually looks. So I might have to move over there. But what you see here is this is a network map. This specifically is a network map. You select an area. Let's say I select this area. What you get here, you see that storage is ticked. So what you see here is actually a time over power chart. So if you want 1 hour of power, the available power that this network can give you is kind of in the range of 0.6 megawatts. If you want 2 hours of event, you can see that the power that you get is around 0.5 because you want more time, so we cannot dispatch the system at the same power level. So that's what you see over here is a time over power chart. But I want more power, so I can add EVs. EVs can give me power. How? By taking them off the grid. So now you see that you get an added power of EV. This is calculated on the fly as you're operating the system. The system looks at the status of, in this case, 1,250 connected systems, 1,250 EVs, and 1,000 solar systems. See the status of every one of them and calculates on the fly for the utility operator or the network operator how much available power they can dispatch from this VPP. I can now select an event, a 2-hour event for 0.6 megawatt power, and I dispatch that event, and at the given time, the given power will be dispatched, and the utility operator tracks that event because sometimes we cannot in real time fulfill it. Systems go down, homeowners come home and change the status of the system. So they see real time how is the event dispatched, and they can react and add more systems if they need. So this is an actual example. Just a few days ago, we dispatched systems here in the PG&E area. We have running VPPs in several parts of the world. I gave you 2 examples. We have a running, I can give you another one. We use aggregation of systems to stabilize frequency on the grid. It's a very tricky thing for a network operator to stabilize frequency. As power is reduced, as load is reduced on the grid, the generators start to spin faster, so the frequency goes up. And as load increases, the generators slow down. So stabilizing frequency is a big deal. So we have VPPs that react to grid frequency and give more power or take more power in order to help stabilize the grid. That's a great deal for you. You have a solar system, you participate in that. We take minute amount of powers from everyone, and we, as an integral, stabilize the grid. That's worth a lot of money. It's called what is called primary capacity reserve for stabilizing the grid. This, in our view, is the future of solar. Eventually, I don't know exactly how much time it's going to take, solar systems are going to grow from solar to solar plus storage. That is not the future. That is the reality now. And they will migrate to a network of systems. Why? Because solar, as Barry said, solar is already cheaper than fossil fuel. And fossil fuel is eventually depleting. But for us to get to a point where solar can be a leading player on the network and be part of the base load, it needs to be a connected system. Because there's a lot of sense in distributed systems, as Peter said, as Barry said, but for that they also need to be connected. That is the future of solar. It's a little bit futuristic, what I showed you now. Yes, we have running VPPs. No, they are by no means even 0.01% of the amount of systems that we have deployed, and not even 0.001% from the amount of solar systems deployed, so it is still futuristic. But in our view, this is the future of solar. And is it a microgrid or a macrogrid? What I just showed. It's a macrogrid, right? Thank you very much.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Lior. I will never not take a meeting with you and Guy again. It's just, it's all about software. Okay. All right. It's my pleasure to introduce the next panelist. So we've got we're talking about policy, we're talking about the batteries, we're talking about the inverters and software. Now we're going to talk about utilities, but we're not going to talk about ordinary utilities. Jan Pepper is the CEO of Peninsula Clean Energy. If you live anywhere between here and San Francisco, Jan probably sells the electricity for your home or your business. Peninsula Clean Energy is a new type of utility called a Community Choice Aggregator, or CCA. So Jan will explain a little bit more of that in her presentation. And I have to say that Jan is, both in experience and name, a very seasoned executive. And I'm especially happy to have another Spice joining me on this panel.
What a connection. That's great. So how many of you live in San Mateo County? All right. So you are no doubt a Peninsula Clean Energy customer. So we are, Peninsula Clean Energy is the official electricity provider for San Mateo County, and we're providing all the residents and businesses with cleaner and greener electricity at lower rates. So this came about actually in 2002. A law was passed that allowed government agencies, entities like cities and counties, to aggregate their electric load and choose what kind of electricity they wanted to have for their constituencies. Nothing came about from that bill until about 2010, when Marin Clean Energy started. And they were the first CCA that started, and we are the fifth in San Mateo County. And we launched initially in October of 2016 with about 20% of the residential load and all of the municipal load. And then we've continued to roll out to all of our customers in April of 2017. And it's an opt-out program, so basically everyone is automatically a customer unless you decide to opt out. So I'll go into the statistics of that a little bit in just a little bit. And we offer two products. So as a Peninsula Clean Energy customer, you receive the default product, which we call Eco Plus. It's 50% renewable, 85% greenhouse gas free. It's priced 5% lower than PG&E, and everyone receives that product. If you want, you can opt up to Eco 100, which is the 100% renewable product. It's Greenie certified, and we charge 1 cent per kilowatt hour more than Eco Plus. It's about 2.5% more than what you would pay PG&E for their typical product, which is right now 29% renewable. So it's a better product at a lower rate. So those of you who live in San Mateo County, how many of you have heard of Peninsula Clean Energy before? Okay, so that's most of you, I think. So that's good. Because basically this whole transition happened. You didn't have to do anything. We sent you 4 notices as required by law. A lot of people just took those and filed them away to read later, and you maybe haven't read them yet. So now you know all about us. So how does it work? So we purchase the electricity on your behalf. PG&E still delivers the electricity over their lines, and they still send the bills, and you benefit from cleaner electricity at lower rates. So there's a line item on your bill that says Peninsula Clean Energy Generation Services, and there's a credit on your bill for what you would have paid PG&E had they been providing that electricity to you. So what are we all about? So there's about 300,000 accounts in San Mateo County. Only 2.4% of our customers opted out and went back to PG&E, which is a really great statistic. That's pretty much the best of all of the CCAs that are out there. And 16 of our cities opted up to 100% renewable energy. Because of the lower rates that we're charging, $17 million is being saved by the businesses and consumers that can be reinvested into the community. 261 million pounds of carbon is being avoided each year. And we're investing in new renewables. So Bernadette should be happy about that we're building both utility scale, and we're also looking to build local renewables within San Mateo County. Just last week, we did a groundbreaking for a new solar project called the Wright Solar Project in Merced County. It's a 200 megawatt solar project that will start delivering power to San Mateo County in December of next year. And then the other good thing about what we do is that we put together local programs to benefit the community. We're governed by a board of directors that consists of a council member from each of the 20 cities in San Mateo County, plus 2 of the county supervisors. And each of those cities had to vote as to whether or not they wanted to be part of Peninsula Clean Energy. There was unanimous votes in favor. Every city and the county, they all had unanimous yes votes to become a part of Peninsula Clean Energy. So there's a lot of support within the county for what we're doing. And we just started an EV promotion program, because what our main mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're taking care of that on the electricity side. Transportation actually is the biggest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in San Mateo County. It's about 61% of the emissions come from transportation. So if we can get people out of their gasoline-powered cars and into electric vehicles using batteries that, who knows, maybe they're LG batteries or whatever. Sure. Huh? I'm sure they are. Yeah, okay. I think you said the volts were right your battery. Using our clean electricity, then we do a lot to continue to reduce GHG emissions. We have a lot of goals. But one of our key goals is to be 100% renewable by 2025. And in order to do that, we're going to need a lot of battery storage. Not only do we want to be 100% renewable, we want to be 100% renewable on a time coincident basis. So we want to manage to have our supply and our demand for every hour of every day be served by renewable energy and match that perfectly. And using distributed energy is going to be one of the tools that we will need to employ to do that. Using batteries and figuring out how to employ battery storage will be a lot of it. And in fact, I'll use this time to let you know that we are hiring for a distributed energy resources manager. So if you know someone who's interested in that, to help us to deploy distributed resources within San Mateo County, please go to our website, peninsulacleanenergy.com, and look for joining our team. So if you haven't heard of Community Choice Energy, it's rapidly expanding across California. The areas of dark green are where the programs have launched already, and there's actually 19 Community Choice Energy programs that are launching. There are a number that are looking at it and continuing to evaluate it. And the prediction is that I think by next year, about 40% of PG&E's load will be served by Community Choice Energy programs, and maybe by 2025, about 80% of California's load will be served by Community Choice Energy programs. So we're very much interested in innovation and trying to move the needle to really be that, we're not a utility, but that energy provider of the future. So is there a microgrid in your future? We believe there's going to be a lot of those. So thank you.
Okay, well, good. It seems like it's unanimous. There is going to be a microgrid in everybody's future. And we're going to need software and a lot of batteries for it. So that's encouraging. Let me see if I can get our presentation here. Okay, now we're going to do the Q&A. So there's just some pictures over there. My panelists can kind of scooch up to the table over there. We've got 2 microphones. And I've got a few questions just to kind of get the ball rolling. And there's some of them are directed at respective panelists. You'll know what questions for you. And we'll just kind of start from left to the right. First big question, specifically, what policies do we need to accelerate the deployment of behind-the-meter microgrids and reduce costs? Bernadette.
You can hear me, right? It's a great question. It's a billion-dollar question. What are the policies we need to continue to deploy these technologies? We just, as Barry mentioned earlier, we spent a whole day on Friday really unpacking all the myriad different policy opportunities and challenges in California with relations to distributed energy resource markets in California. And I want to emphasize, even though we renamed ourselves the Solar and Storage Association, you can imagine we went through many different iterations of a name. We thought about smart and we thought about sustainable. We finally ended up saying, solar and storage is still kind of a specific thing that we can sell, even though behind the solar and storage, those are sort of dumb technologies compared to the software and the brains and the opportunities that those technologies basically come to represent. So I think the very near term for California is, one is we need to absolutely defend the right and ability for consumers, whether they're homeowners or schools or farmers, to be part of this energy transformation as self-storers of energy, and then as part of a sharing economy. That right to self-generate that we've been benefiting from, there's almost 1 million of us in California that are self-generators, that is actually not sacred in any kind of state statute or any kind of regulation. It absolutely can be taken away, and some of our, unfortunately, municipal utilities in California have done just that. So we need to fight for that. That's going to take place maybe in legislation, we're hoping this year, but it's also going to take place at the Public Utilities Commission as they debate another round of net metering policies to create what is that value that you get as a consumer for the electrons you put back on the grid. That value, whatever that number is that the PUC will determine, is going to absolutely either make or break your ability to invest in a solar and a storage system with a smart inverter and whether or not it pencils out. So that is kind of in policy priority number 1, packaged up in my mind as the right to self-generate and self-store and participate in the clean energy future. Second to that is reducing soft costs. So as Barry mentioned that earlier, this is an ongoing issue for us in California. It is a major part of the cost of going clean, and We're going to need to keep at it. Our local municipal building offices, some are better than others at getting a permit simple. And some of them are better than others at just understanding energy storage, and that's a whole new technology for us. And we're trying to get our building officials and departments to enter the 21st century by doing permitting online and other things to help reduce those costs. On top of that, we have problems with interconnection in the utilities. So especially on the commercial side, the utilities are really major impediments to our customers being able to turn on and electrify that solar and storage system in a timely manner. Believe it or not, some of our large industrial and commercial customers are waiting 2 years to interconnect their system. So those are top 3 right now as we implement also this incentive program that we just got passed. I have a question. Who here wants to guess a very important person who has a microgrid on his and his wife's vacation or retirement home? Anyone has a guess of who in California? Jerry Brown. Exactly. So as he has signed that bill into law, and as he rides off into the sunset, him and Gus Brown, they're going to go home to a beautifully powered with solar and a huge battery storage system at their off-grid ranch up in, I think, Colusa County. So those are my top 3 on the top of my mind policies, but ultimately the really wonky stuff that Lior would love is all about providing that incentive for consumers to share their electrons across property lines so we can get to that aggregated, again, shared energy future. Right now there's no market for that, so it is futuristic not only in terms of deployment, but there is no market for it, and that is one of the other huge issues that we are tackling on behalf of this industry at the Public Utilities Commission. And as you might imagine, the utilities are not quite there in lockstep with us. So it's a battle to get there. At the end of the day, we will prevail. If you read these IPPC reports, you might get really depressed. I think these presentations, to me, illustrate technology will take off so fast if we get out of the way. So that's what we have to do. I would say, and if you guys that I'm jumping ahead, but we need to actually press our elected officials to make sure that they are helping us deploy quickly. Yeah. And I'm done.
All right. Jan, just out of curiosity, is the microphone working?
No.
No. Okay, well, we got one microphone in.
Actually, can I jump in on that question?
Of course. Bernadette, you're going to have to repeat all that.
So Bernadette talked a little bit about the utilities and the difficulties with interconnection. I want to also add that as a non-investor-owned utility entity like ours, wanting to do innovative projects that may provide support to the grid, PG&E owns that grid. And right now, there's no way for us to monetize any benefits that we might be able to provide to the grid by the projects that we do. So that's the other thing that needs to change on the policy side, is that if you're not the utility but you're doing something that supports the grid and allows them to say, delay some other kind of upgrade that they're doing, then we should be compensated for that, and that mechanism needs to be employed so that we can do that.
And from the technical side, one very important regulation that, in my view, is lacking so even solar systems today, they are a big share of the grid production, and we do not have enough certification and regulation around protecting these systems. Cyber protection, physical protection, this is something that someone can very easily disrupt the grid in a big way, and there is not enough today protection and regulation, and especially if we want to move forward to VPPs and things like that. But even today, there is not enough protection and regulation which can actually fairly easy be devised on how we do we protect our grid. And that is also something that is missing from the protective side.
Bernadette really did a great job in terms of what's happening locally at the state, but just at even the federal level, I know this is a little bit more towards the front of the meter and large behind the meter systems, but with FERC Order 841, which really encourages or mandates the regional transmission operators and the ISOs to give batteries, or give storage systems equal standing versus other forms, other technologies that provide services to the grid. And it's the first time that the RTOs and ISOs have been mandated to treat storage that way. That was a great breakthrough. But the devil, as always, is in the details, because storage is such a different animal. It's much more challenging to determine how, in fact, you put the value against storage, because it's a generator and it's a load, and what rate supply when it's developing. So if there was one wish list that we'd provide at the federal level, would be some way to expedite the way in which FERC Order 841 could be implemented, because that would help not just front of meter but also behind meter systems.
Right, security is a big issue. There's kind of bizarre Byzantine rules that apply to who can send power over wires, and I kind of ran into this in our office in Campbell. There's 10 companies in this unit, in this big building, each of which has 10 meters. Now we have solar and batteries on 2 of the units. I can't send power from unit K to unit J between those 2 meters. That's kind of restricted. That's only the purview of the utility. So what are some of the other limiting factors to trading energies between microgrids? Will blockchain help? How can we do this if we can't use the utilities wires?
Well, there's no reason why we can't use the utilities wire. I think that's a policy problem, not an engineering or a physical problem. I think probably the most important policy we could pass, but I'm not putting it on my to-do list just yet because I don't think I can pass it, but is basically breaking up. You know, California took on deregulation in 1997. We didn't really deregulate, right? We still basically have one utility per region. The CCAs offer something entirely new, but other than that, it's a complete monopoly, and it's almost entirely vertically integrated. We should actually break up generation from transmission from distribution and actually put a third party in charge. We do so with the transmission wholesale level with the California Independent System Operator, but at the distribution level it's all one animal running the show, and they don't always have, I think, the best interest in mind in terms of the evolution of these changes. So we should set up a distribution system operator as the single most powerful policy to get what you're getting at.
But not this year. Okay. So we're talking about these policies. What are the attitudes of incumbent utilities towards the growth of this behind-the-meter solar and storage and microgrids? How are they reacting? We can be candid here.
I'll take a first shot at that. That's almost an impossible question to answer succinctly, because you talk to 10 utilities, you'll get 10 different answers. But let me try and be positive. And we talk to utilities both inside California, outside California, and utilities are risk averse. Obviously, they're paid to keep the lights on and not take too much technical risk. But they do recognize that the technology and storage and integrated with PV has an awful lot to offer. And I'll just throw one example just to show how it's happening. I won't mention the utility, but it's on the East Coast rather than the West. But they are really seeing the way in which the residential storage in particular technologies have moved forward. And they'll be deploying, in pretty early 2019, initial pilot system, but they plan to scale up to thousands of units. But they can see a huge potential benefit on the distribution system by owning the assets and giving the homeowner, the host, some sort of credit on their electric bill, but the utility has got the first call on how those batteries are charged and dispatched. And they've done on an aggregate basis, just very much similar to what Laura was talking about through the VPP. That's exactly the system. But I think the utilities are now starting to see that customer-sided storage, and they're focused on residential, it could be C&I, behind being commercial industrial, but they can see huge potential advantage by aggregating these assets and deploying them as a fleet. So I think that although the utilities have been slow to come to market, I think there's a growing realization of the benefits of the distribution system that these assets can provide.
So I can I think I can bring a little bit of a global view here. So SolarEdge sells in around 110 countries today, and my commute is long, not just to California, to all of our offices. And I think that the message that we should send to utilities, and utilities are getting, is that resistance is futile. You see that over time, the more mature distributed generation is, utilities are adopting it. So you can see places around the world. Germany is one pivotal example, but not only Germany, where there is much more deregulation. And not only that, there are countries around the world where utilities are adopting solar in a big way. The biggest installers, the biggest advocates for solar and storage are the big utilities, not even the small and more agile utilities that need to differentiate themselves. And they have already put together a marketplace where you can trade energy, and that is evolving around Europe, and it is evolving around Australia. And yes, there are countries and places around the world where a utility comes to a nation and says, we have one inspector for the entire nation, you will wait 5 years for that inspector to come. But the general message, resistance is futile. Everyone will adopt it eventually. How much time? That's a different question. Bernadette can help.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. We'll get back to the questions in a minute. Let's shift gears, and based on the show of hands before, I bet a lot of you were wondering, once Peter's company is able to ship enough batteries, how can I add a battery to my existing solar power system? Are there any add-on systems that somebody can buy today? And you know, perhaps in Lior's terms, how can I become assimilated in the VPP Borg?
Taking it a step further, I see. So basically, everyone can add a battery. You can even have a battery if you don't have PV. Basically, all you need is a smart inverter. All inverters take from DC to AC that is bidirectional. If you have one that is already managing your PV, you can what is called DC couple your battery to the DC side of that inverter if it supports it. And if you don't, then you need another inverter to AC couple your battery. And then, even if you don't have PV, you have backup. You have the ability to time of use energy, if it is allowed. The regulation is not always permitting that. And to prosume energy. But AC coupling is a very popular option, and it is available today in the market. Windows battery available.
Windows batteries. Peter's working on it.
I'll just add that the $800 million in incentive funds, just to reiterate that those are available whether or not you have it paired with a solar system. The federal tax credit is a little different, but you can get these state tax credits or incentives with or without solar. And if you have a net meter 1.0 system and you want to protect that net meter, and you can add storage without knocking yourself into a different net metering structure. Make the economics not work out as well, but with time of use rates, it should make a difference once those get rolled out.
And one of the things that we're really interested in is using electric vehicles as our battery storage. And as we're trying to match the supply to the demand in San Mateo County as a start, if we can use, once vehicle-to-grid technology gets there, we'll have all of this mobile storage wandering around through the county. And if we can harness that to conquer the duck curve or whatever the future problems are going to be, I think that's a really exciting place to go. Is your software going to do that? For sure. Okay.
Software can do anything.
To write it down so it will actually do it, but for sure.
Okay. So there's a lot. We'll get to audience questions in about 15 minutes. There's a lot going on in terms of tariffs and international manufacturing. How are the current and possibly future tariffs and the U.S. manufacturing constraints affecting the growth of microgrids, and specifically solar panels, inverters, and batteries? Is it having an impact now?
I'll Just do a very quick answer as far as the battery is concerned. Touch wood, it's not having any impact to date. We are currently shipping most of our batteries into the North American market from our facilities in China. And so we're monitoring the tariff situation very closely. When the first round of tariffs came in earlier on this year, we were a bit concerned because lithium batteries were on the tariff list, but they were just primary cells, so the ones used in disposable batteries. The secondary cells, subject to the rechargeable cells, have not been covered, and we're sort of rather optimistically hoping they won't be, because they have such a negative impact on the automotive business, let alone our own business. But it's something we're tracking very, very closely. The fact that we have a manufacturing plant in Holland and Michigan puts us in a slightly advantageous position to have some flexibility, but the impact of tariffs would be enormous because of the percentage increase in costs.
The industry is called the solar coaster because tariffs keeps changing and rates keeps changing and custom rates keeps changing. It has a big effect eventually on the industry. The increase of prices of solar modules had an effect on the rate that solar systems are being installed, and even now when there are rates on modules and even inverters coming from China, prices in the market go up. When prices go up, the rate of installation changes. That is without a doubt. The trend is still growth, which is, I think, for the future. This is a panel about the future. For the future, as long as the trend is growth and the prices keep dropping down, and eventually the rate accelerates all the time, but on a month effect or a quarter effect, there's a big effect.
I'll just add, one of the interesting things about the tariffs is what they did to non-PV module manufacturing jobs in California and elsewhere in the United States. So a lot of the balance of system components, the racking, the other components that go into a solar system are actually made here in the United States. And when we increase the price of steel or aluminum, or just increase the cost of the modules themselves, it has a downward effect on market demand and growth, and therefore it actually has hurt manufacturing jobs here in the U.S. So that's been sort of this side consequence. That said, I always want to point out, given that my job is to keep the California market strong, that decisions made by the Brown administration around net metering, around rate structures, other issues will have slowed our market down far more than any Trump administration tariff decision. So ultimately, our market is still local, and the decisions made by California regulators ultimately are far more impactful. That's not to say that I'm not trying to create a race between Brown and Trump on who can hurt us more. Don't get me wrong, but just to remind ourselves that it's our local state officials that actually really determine the viability and the fate of this market.
What we're seeing is that the tariffs are going to slow down the building of new projects. So right now, if a company already has modules available and they can build a new project, especially utility scale projects, and they already have the modules that they bought before the tariffs were imposed, that they can hold their price. Otherwise, when we're going out there and we're putting out RFPs for new generation, hundreds of megawatts of generation, we're seeing that the start dates for those projects are farther out into the future because so they won't start until 2023 when the tariffs have started going down. So it's just going to slow down the industry. And I think if you look at history and the history of tariffs and do they ever accomplish what someone thinks they're going to do, the answer is no.
Yeah, these policy things are so challenging. Well, talking about policies, perhaps the most important policy we have in the solar industry and the storage industry is net metering. Started with net metering 1, then net metering 2. CalSA worked really hard on that. Now we're looking at a fight for net metering 3. How would possible significant changes in net metering 3 affect the growth of this microgrid behind the meter industry? Pass it to the left.
It is absolutely the foundation. No matter what. So if you wanted to completely island yourself and have assumed that every California ratepayer is going to have solar and storage and they're going to just be an island unto themselves and never share electrons, net metering wouldn't really matter. We would just overbuild our systems. We would have huge batteries, huge panels on the roof. And we just wouldn't matter. What net metering does is it enables us to more efficiently deploy renewable energy and reduce the cost of integrating those renewable electrons onto our grid. And it's beneficial for all of us, but it's absolutely the single most important foundational policy for the deployment of solar and storage and microgrids, however you want to define them. So the next governor is going to preside over this decision, and it's just I can't underscore. I mean, the rate structures are important, but ultimately, rates are probably going to keep going up, even if the time periods change. Storage allows us to be agile in responding to that. But what that value is and how you interact as a consumer with the grid and how you get fair treatment for your investment, your miniature power plant, is we could really stop this market dead in its tracks with the wrong decision.
All right. Okay, so shifting from policy to technology, how can technology or equipment innovations, both on the hardware and the software side, lower the installation labor and other soft costs, both for batteries and inverters?
Well, from a battery perspective, I'll try and keep it brief as well. There's so much can be done. I mentioned before that not only is technology improving the energy density, and therefore you need fewer battery racks or fewer containers, fewer enclosures, which always tends to reduce the installation costs. But especially in the behind-the-meters commercial industrial segment, the fact there are more standard systems that are pre-assembled in the factory, they're factory tested, drop shipped at site. So that's two benefits. It tries to maintain a higher quality of the installed system. If you're installing distributed systems in different parts of the country, more remote locations, the quality of the installation will vary quite a bit. And you're also reducing costs, because having labor doing the factory assembly and possibly not doing the assembly in the field can be a bit of a cost saver. So there's a number of different ways. I wouldn't say there's anything that's extraordinary in terms of a cost reduction move. But any way you can save sort of 2, 3, 4, 5%, it always helps to improve the economics of any installation.
Yeah, so, of course, technology is bringing cost reduction. Technology is bringing density, energy density in batteries, higher levels of production with modules, more efficient inverters. This is all things that technology is bringing. We also see that the more systems are connected and monitored and controlled, then interconnection becomes easier. Because eventually it's very different from someone connecting, let's say, a mechanical power plant somewhere on the grid, and now you need to verify physically how the interaction and the interconnection with the grid goes in terms of stability. And when you have something which is stabilized and remote controlled and remote monitored, so there can be an ease up in the feasibility studies and analysis and interconnection testing, which can take a long time. So technology is also helping in that.
So it's interesting, just my recollection of the improvement in technology. The first battery storage inverter that we put in, we do tests at our office, and so I was installing this over the weekend, but I couldn't lift the thing myself. It weighed like 80 pounds hanging on the wall, so I got assistance from my wife. So the two of us managed to kind of hang the thing on the wall. But now the new inverters are small enough so that I can just do something else and my wife would mount the inverter on the wall. It's just a lot easier. I mean, they've gotten that much smaller. And also, you mentioned the thing about monitoring. The biggest customer service issue that I've had for almost 20 years has been monitoring, and the cellular communications. It's just plug and play. You just turn the thing on, put the SIM card in there, and they work. So that's a really big improvement that we've seen in inverters.
As well. The importance of companies like SolarEdge for enabling our business can't be underestimated. Unfortunately, the battery is a bit of a dumb animal. It sits there. It needs to be told what to do. And our interface with the outside world is through the inverter and the control system. So what Lior's company is doing is critical for our success. So we're very, very closely connected there.
Okay, well, I had a list of kind of sample questions here. We've got some time for audience questions. Sir, let's get the microphone. Is there another one? Okay, coming down. We got two. All right.
Okay, so a lot of this really all comes down to economics. And so when is the grid going to be really smart where there's a instantaneous price, so that if I could buy a storage unit and buy low and sell high? When is the grid going to have a signal out there, here's the current price of electricity?
We've been thinking about that for a long time, basically real-time pricing. And for some large commercial customers, I think they are able to see what the wholesale prices are and to manage their usage that way. But the problem is that the retail prices and the wholesale prices don't line up at all. So we need that in order to really have the grid be efficient. So I don't know. I've been in this business for 30 years, and we've been talking about it for 30 years.
And now we have Amazon.
So for those really paying attention, part of our pitch for this SB 700, again, getting back to this, it's sort of a dumb policy, right? We're just trying to deploy a bunch of batteries with it. That's all. But ultimately, we see it as a bridge to when we will have true real-time pricing. We estimate this is going to take another 4 years, maybe, of PUC policymaking to get to any kind of real price. So at the earliest, we're a couple of years away.
Okay, great. Got a question back here, Dale.
Yeah, I've got some technology questions. So this is a two-parter, one for Peter and then one for Lior. Peter, from the battery technology, you've spent, you said, $250 million over the past few years, and over the history there's been manganese and phosphate and flow batteries. Have you looked at anything else that will help us get out of the sort of flattish cost on the lithium ion? And then for Lior, Barry tells me that right now we can get an inverter. We can take two of these 10 kilowatt hour things. Or how soon can I see one that can handle 5 or 50 kilowatt hours?
Okay, so the first question on battery should be relatively straightforward. We're probably one of the few companies that we actually manufacture a range of different lithium chemistries, iron phosphate, lithium titanate. Most of the batteries we do today are nickel, cobalt, manganese, NCM. One of the big advantages of NCM is the much higher volumetric density, and so it's good for automotive and exceptionally good for behind-the-meter systems, residential or C&I. But for sure, we know there's going to be a world beyond lithium batteries. And by the way, there's a big misconception with regards to materials availability. Lithium is not in short supply. The issues for our batteries today tends to be the cost of cobalt, because it comes from a limited number of parts of the world. So we and some of our competitors are doing all we can to reduce the cobalt content. So I still think that with today's lithium chemistry, even with NCM, there's a lot of life ahead of it. It's not going to be term limited for the next 5-10 years. It's got a lot of future ahead of it, and there's a lot of improvements can be made by mixing the ratios of nickel, cobalt, and manganese. But beyond, yes, we do a lot of research. That $250 million that we spend annually in R&D is looking at how can we improve the chemistries of tomorrow, but literally a year ahead, 2 years ahead, but also what would be the chemistries in 20 years' time. You mentioned flow batteries. It's something we're kind of interested in as well. There's nothing that we make commercially available. But we think there will be a time when there will be a need for a storage asset that can deliver 12 plus hours of storage. Actually, I've worked for a flow battery company in my past. It wasn't a very successful chemistry. But there's a lot of potential there with flow batteries. But the interesting thing is, certainly in North America, there's not really much of a market demand. You know, we've deployed lithium batteries that meet an 8-hour need on the East Coast, and that was economically viable. But we still have not seen many applications that have warranted the deployment of something like a flow.
Yeah, so for the question, how soon can you have 50 kilowatt hour of power? So yes, today our system, for example, can handle 2 of these, and that there is no technological limit in limiting for 2. 2 is a product decision and not a technological issue. Okay, so not many people opt for 2 batteries, and even much less than that opt for more because of the price. So we made a product decision not to support more than 2. There's nothing in the technology that prevents supporting 5 or 10. It's just a matter of synchronizing the bus and having enough communication ports. So it's a product decision and not a technology decision. But batteries are getting bigger and bigger also. So 50 kilowatts, I think, also in battery density and with 3 and not 2 is just around the corner, if someone needs it and willing to pay for it.
Okay, questions. We've got a question over here on the left, please.
And this is getting back a bit to the economics of the thing. I've always been a fan of trying to figure out the economic cost, and my metric now is dollars per kilowatt hour transferred, because the battery's like a tire, it wears out, and it depends on how you use it. So just talking about kilowatts or kilowatt hours doesn't help you in the economic value, and I wondered what you think about that.
Yeah, where do you start? The problem is there's as many different duty cycles as you can probably list. It's interesting. That question comes up occasionally when we talk to some customers. They want to know what dollars per kilowatt hour is in particular applications, but it's really hard for us to come up with that. And so that's why we always, as a matter of course, we just start with the dollars per kilowatt hour for the basic rec system before degradation, because the way that battery can be used is infinite. It's really challenging. I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I understand why you'd ask a question like that. You really want to know what the cost would be for your particular use of using a battery. But if I had 100 companies in here, you'd probably find there's about 98 different ways the battery is going to be used.
Well, then how do you make an evaluation from an economic standpoint?
Yeah, well, simple, very quick answer to that is, it results in having to do a quick analysis to see what the size of the battery is to meet the need that you have. And that's the same, whether it's behind the meter commercial industrial or whether it's in front of the meter system. The only market segment where it's easier to address that is usually residential, because it's sized based on the battery being cycled once a day, 365 days a year, unfortunately.
Segue to you. So actually, you've asked something that is also missing on the regulation side, and in the very, very early days of solar inverters, everybody had their own way of calculating efficiency, a long, long, long time ago. So I can have the best peak efficiency, and someone can have the overall something efficiency or a max power efficiency, and then came here in California, the CEC weighted efficiency, which basically took some weighting based on the amount of sun hours that there are a day to weight the inverter efficiency. And that became the rule, and that became a certified means of measuring inverter efficiency. We are lacking today in the battery world some kind of an agreed measure of how many megawatt hours can a battery dish out in the course of its lifetime. Some countries have tried defining something like 80% capacity drop in 10 years on an average cycle, but what is an average cycle? And it matters the temperature. The problem that makes it a little bit more complicated than a weighted efficiency of an inverter is that it really is multi-parameters, that every one of them have a significant impact. The depth of the cycle, the number of the cycle, the rate of the cycles, the temperature of the battery, these are at least some of the factors I can think of. I still believe that some agreement per industry or per segment needs to happen because, trust me, there are very, very different batteries out there. They are all nameplated the same.
So,
I'm just going to joke that, so I drive a Chevy Bolt, which I always joke is basically an LG battery on wheels. And there's all of this technology, and then there's consumer behavior. And I got to tell you, I can't put a price on the joy of putting it on sport and going really fast. I don't care if it's wearing up my battery. But I can tell you what you do is you put a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old in the back seat, and they try to get the display, and you put the display that gives you your driving technique score, and that'll rein me in. Mom, your score is -5.
So when people ask us that question when we're selling the batteries, LG does a pretty good job of specifying the warranty on this battery. So it lasts for 10 years, and they guarantee that it'll have 27.4 megawatt hours of capacity over those 10 years, which is basically cycling almost every day for a 10-year period.
Can I just ask one little bit of detail? Lior mentioned a good point as well about the battery being rated for the energy throughput. That question comes up quite a bit as well, and you mentioned that as well, Lior. But for something to say behind the meter, like commercial industrial logic system or front the meter system, that question gets asked a lot with regards to how we relate the warranty to the battery. But the problem is, when you get into something like a larger battery, how it's operated can vary tremendously. So for example, I can have two batteries that have the same energy throughput over 10, 15 years, but the degradation rates can vary a lot. If one battery is held at a high state of charge versus a medium or a low state of charge, or if it charges and then immediately discharges, so it'll be doing it at a high temperature rather than the rest period between charge and discharge. There are so many factors, and I could probably mention several more, but those were the key differentiators that could determine very different degradation rates and therefore different sizes of battery for the same application.
Okay, great. Any more questions? One way in the back, and then you, sir, in the middle. We'll do the back first.
Hi, this one's probably mostly for Mr. Gibson, but obviously you all can jump in. You said something about a market for an 8 to 12 hour application, or maybe the lack of a market there, but mentioned something on the East Coast. So I'm just really curious, what is a market for an 8 to 12 hour energy storage?
Yeah, so very simply, I can't mention too many names because I guess the projects haven't officially been announced, although one project is in full commercial operation, the other one will be in commercial operation in December. But there are two projects in New York State, and they're providing capacity, in an area of the grid not very far away from New York City, which has severe capacity constraints at certain times of the year. And that's why they need the 8 hours of capacity. Each one of those projects is rated 5 megawatts for 8 hours, so that's why it's an 8-hour system. When I said 8 to 12, what I was referring to there is to go beyond 8 hours, and I was just picking 12, just randomly, but typically the longer the duration, the more expensive a lithium-ion battery is because it's kilowatt hours or megawatt hours. And so lithium can really struggle to be competitive if you're looking at 12 hours or more duration to be supported. And that's why I think there's an opportunity for flow batteries. But in the 5 years I've been in the storage business with LGChem, I can only recall one project, which also was on the East Coast around New York, where they were looking for a 12-hour solution. And they eventually decided not to go with batteries, and they went with standby gas turbines instead.
Okay, we got time for 2 more questions. We'll keep them kind of brief, sir, over there in the middle.
Well, one general comment I'd make is that to look to Puerto Rico, their electric system was completely demolished, and they're rebuilding it with microgrids and solar in a big way. And then the second comment is a question for Jan. Is this new exit fee that PUC granted going to affect the CCA regime?
Yes. So just to give a little background, for any departing load customer, whether you're a direct access customer, community choice energy customer, the idea is that the utilities purchased power or made investments in contracts for power for all these customers, and now that they've all left and become CCA customers, the utility needs to dispose of that power that they contracted for, and because prices right now in the market are relatively low, they're disposing of the power at a loss. So they may be paid $100 per megawatt hour for something, and now they're only getting $30 per megawatt hour. So there's an exit fee that's charged to all of the CCA customers so that the customers who stayed with the utility are indifferent. And it's called the power charge indifference adjustment. Over the last year, there's been a large proceeding at the Public Utilities Commission to discuss that exit fee, and the CCAs provided evidence of what we thought would be a fair value. The utilities provided evidence of what they thought was a fair value. And the ruling that came out last week was heavily in the utilities' favor. We believe that it's totally wrong, that in fact the CCA customers will now be definitely supporting the bundled customers. And so yeah, it's a problem because the way we price our electricity is we set our prices based on PG&E's rates. So if PG&E's residential rate is whatever it is, we will take 5% off of that rate in order to provide the savings, and then we'll also subtract off the PCIA rate, so that what our customers are paying to us when they pay our rate plus the PCIA, they are still 5% below PG&E. So when that PCIA increases, which it is projected to increase substantially, the amount that we can collect now is squeezed, and it puts more pressure on us. Peninsula Clean Energy is in very good financial shape. We purposely didn't launch any additional programs or anything until we made sure we were financially strong, but it could limit the amount of other programs that we're able to offer or the rate at which we're going to do that. So you will see us in the legislature, you will see us at the Public Utilities Commission. We are going to fight this so that it is fair for all electric customers.
Okay, we had one more question over here on the left, please.
Yeah, so this is related to what you just said, Jan, but also something, Bernadette, you mentioned. You said the cost of electricity is going to keep going up, you think, right? Is that because of the PCIA? Because the more renewable generation there is, and if everyone is trying to get to 100% renewable and it's solar, the cost is just going to keep going down. So is it because, and if 80% of Californians are expected to shift to CCAs by 2025, is it because the PCIA charge that you expect the prices to keep going, the retail prices to keep going up?
There's the reason the prices are going to go up, in our opinion, is because of the distribution and transmission charges. So if you look at your bill, there's a generation charge, which is what the CCAs charge. There's the PCIA, and then there's the electric delivery, and then there's a whole bunch of other non-bypassable charges for nuclear decommissioning, blah, 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 blah. But really, if you look at the delivery charges, which is the transmission and distribution system, those are going up considerably. The bill that was just passed, and Bernadette might be able to comment on this as well, the wildfire bill that was passed basically is going to charge the ratepayers for any negligence that PG&E incurred because of all the fires, all the people that were killed. So they're going to be, the shareholders will bear a little bit of it, but most of it will be put on the ratepayers. So
related to that, why would we blow up North? Right, for your solutions to get deployed, we can't do it under the current regime.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because the utilities do make their rate of return on their capital infrastructure. So the poles and wires and other things that they put in the ground is what they earn their rate of return on and the way they make their money. So, and with more distributed generation, there's a concern that, well, that should reduce the cost of the distribution system. And there should be mechanisms for entities like ours and others to be able to be compensated for the investments that the utilities don't have to make. But that goes against their profit motive, so there's some difficulties there, there's some conflicts the way that the market is set up. I'm sure Bernadette has some more to add to that.
It is almost 9:30. We were at a PUC event last week. It was myself and some of Jan's colleagues from the CCA, and our panel was called the Disruptors panel. And, you know, that's just lovingly and unlovingly how the PUC thinks of us. I suppose it's a little bit pessimistic of me to say rates are going to continue to go up, because if we were able to, and when we are able to actually reverse the direction and truly diversify how we do things, prices will come down and energy will become more affordable and cheaper. But until then, it's going to keep going up. The utilities have never managed to do anything cheaper. Our technologies and our industry has always done things cheaper year over year. So at some point, those worlds are going to clash and collide, and the consumer will benefit. But until then, I think you can kind of bank on rates going up.
To your question, the fuse is lit. Again, many countries around the world have active regulation around what is called non-wire alternatives. Basically, when a utility wants to invest in infrastructure, in transmission, they need to publish the cost of that project and the logic behind that project. So we build a substation for this area because the expected growth in energy demand in that area will be thus in 5 years. And companies are allowed to offer non-wire alternatives, VPPs, local generation, whatever. And if they have a viable project that is thus cheaper than the utility option, the utility is mandated to allow that project. That's the rule, for example, in most states in Australia. And then VPPs and many other things. Solar is deployed as a non-wire alternative, funded by the same budget that was supposed to fund, government budget that was supposed to fund the utility real wire alternative. And whatever we see around the world eventually spreads around. Sometimes it takes 5 years, sometimes it takes 50 years, but it will come.
All right, very good. Well, a lot of times that kind of thing starts here in California, and we've been benefiting from that. And I'm really, really happy to have our panel of disruptors here. Thank you very much. Terrific.